So I've thought all week long about how I was going to do this video. Because when you make videos long, sometimes what's happening is you're not being concise enough with what you're talking about. And that's less entertaining for the audience. And YouTube is about entertainment. You know, I'm not trying to fool myself here. I'm not pushing the channel in any way, shape, or form just because I think I want to be as authentic as I can. And I'd like to reach more people if I could, but I'm not really too worried about it. I just want to bless the people God puts in my path to bless. But there's a certain degree where you have to consider your audience. But then I also want to provide the absolute best possible analysis of something that I can, and be the best possible teacher that I possibly can. So with that, I have an 18-point, 12-page response to this debate. Almost all of it deals primarily with Matt Dillahunty's take on things. And the reason why I'm so thorough on this is because Dillahunty has what's called cerebral dexterity. He's very good in a debate in responding to his opponents, really good at it. I actually am very impressed and respect him as a thinker. And so what I have to do then is, since he's not here to defend himself, and he'll never probably see this, and maybe people on his side, or even not many of his detractors. In fact, many of you won't see all of this. This is probably going to be very long. And I'm just going to break them up like I usually do, but I'm suspecting this could be 5 episodes. I mean, this is going to be a lot of material to go over. But it's worth it to me, to anyone out there who may one day come across this, that I was as thorough as I could possibly be. It touches on some serious subjects. I actually dreaded doing this to a degree too. I really wanted to do it, and I dreaded it because I knew this is exactly what would happen. And I have to put a lot of work into it. And the only reason I knew it was going to take a lot of work like this was out of respect for Dillahunty. That if I was debating him, I would want to have the best possible response and be the best witness I could be, you know. And again, knowing that he's just not here, it's just like, this guy's really good at one-on-one debates, does a call-in show. He's not here, you know, and so I just want to be as thorough as I can possibly be. I will say, if he were here, he'd have a response. I'll tell you right now, I know. He'd have a response. And he may have one off the top of his head, too. The guy is very sharp. But he's not an academic, and don't confuse those things. There's a reason why you won't see top-flight academics debating people that don't have PhDs. As you move your way up in the academic world, you become more and more specialized. And you see this even with academics who have a diverse array of things they study. They will debate particular topics. And so they won't debate atheism, right? They won't debate. I remember when when Sam Harris finally got his PhD, Craig finally debated him. And to deal with Harris, I mentioned this in an earlier video, to deal with some of his points, he just presented a book in response and said, look, that's not what this debate's about. And he knew Harris wouldn't be on track. Why? Because Harris has had many public debates, and they're pretty broad in their perspective. And it's really hard to pin someone down with something as broad as atheism and theism. And not only that, because these people are not trained in specializing. Not that I'm trained in it. Don't make any mistake. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here. I'm not trained in it either. But you can see why I'm siding with the specialists on this. You can see why they don't want to deal with someone who's coming at such broad angles, because you can go anywhere with some of these responses. And that's exactly what happens. But for both of these guys, they're all over the place. Don't misunderstand me. This is a really good debate. It is really good. Matt Dillahunty is so entertaining. Both these guys are, I mean, it's actually, I can't pronounce his name. and I apologize for that. Man, I have his name written down, and I'm really sorry. I didn't mean. I meant before I started to take a take here that I would take the time to get to know his name. Scrivener. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Scrivener. You'd think after a week of watching this debate, I'd have his name down, but Scrivener. He's just all over Dillahunty on quite a few issues. All right, so I'm going to take my time. I'm not going to pressure myself. I'll keep these to 20 minutes. I'm going to cut myself off at a certain point, unless I'm on a roll. If it has to be 30 minutes, I'll do that. I'm going to try to get all these done here today, if possible. It's a lot of notes, and I'm going to just read directly from them, see where that leads me. And one day, if you're bored and have time, maybe put this on in the background, give you something to listen to. I'm going to cover a lot of subjects, and you can go look these up and watch debates on YouTube over specific areas. You can there's academics that have dealt with these specifics, okay, that just these singular areas. And a lot of people don't realize that, that when you've got two people debating and they're bringing up they're using a broad notion to defend themselves. There's, as the movie Dune, 1984 Dune, there's plans within plans. You could sit there and just drill down into the bottom of all these subjects. And it happens very early in the debate where they bring up epistemology. And it's just like, man, it's a big subject to bring up. So, I want to talk about the winner of the debate. I thought the first time I watched the debate, it was too close to call. And I said, okay, I'll just be honest with my audience. And I'll go with Scrivener because I've got a bias. Might as well pick the guy that I want to win. But after watching the debate many times, I'm convinced Scrivener won. At first, I was like, yeah, if an atheist came to me and said Dillahunty won, I'd be like, yeah, I can see it. Sure. I can see why you think that. Not now. Not in the last 10 minutes. Both Justin Breyer and Scrivener get Dillahunty to admit that his worldview cannot offer intrinsic value to a human being. That, like the animal kingdom, if you sap resources, they can't really, and this was in the context of Hitler killing, performing eugenics and so forth. And not exactly that topic. In fact, it was dealing with how Down syndrome babies are being terminated, in pregnancy. And he said, I personally think they have value, but I can't argue for them having intrinsic value. Thought that was really honest. That's one thing you learn about Dillahunty. He's honest. Very, very honest. The other reason why I thought he lost at this point in the debate, too, it was kind of close, but at this point he really lost. You see towards the end his body language change when they start getting on relativism. They never even call it relativism. And I say they because Briley presses him on it, too. Dillahunty's like sitting up in his chair and looking. It was super focused. Whereas before he was very relaxed. And he gets irritated. And it made his arguments, it made him look like he felt looked like he lacked confidence in this segment. Did he have a response? He had a response. Guy's smart. But he knows, I think he knows, he wouldn't have a problem with me saying it probably too, that I don't think his response was the best response for atheism. Look, I think the guy wants to be a good moral person. I believe that. I can't prove it or anything, but I think he wants to be. One could make the case, well, maybe he only wants to be perceived as a good moral person. Because he may admit to that. He may say, yeah, how many of us really know the full depths of our hearts? Why would we expect that Matt Dillahunty, why should he be any different? He's a human like the rest of us. So there's a couple other things I have in the debate. I think you'll find this entertaining. But I think more than any of the things I'm going to offer as a teacher, we're really going to dive into some stuff here. So I'm going to go off my notes. This is my first part. Let's see if I can keep it to 10 minutes. When these get uploaded, I think people will be surprised at how much content I'm uploading here. Again, probably a little too much. I don't expect anyone to watch all these. It's quite a bit, but maybe over time that'll happen. Somebody will get something out of it. All right, point one. Dillahunty's take about conversions. He's had about epistemology and mentions justification. Now, Robert Audie also uses the term justification when talking about epistemology. Now, what's epistemology? It's in the shorthand, it's about knowledge, but it's more than that. It's about the noetic structure of our thoughts, and that's just to say how these chains of thoughts work together, how we combine thoughts and what we believe. So it's a pretty broad topic. When he mentioned justification, I did a lot of research on that, because as soon as he said epistemology and justification, I'm like, he's not drilling down into what his epistemology actually is. And that's what I mean. That's why academics don't do these debates. Both atheists and Christians don't, because this is a big area. So glad I have the coffee here, man. I'm a little tired and really wanted to get this done today. Robert Audie also uses the term, but that is not necessarily the best way of arriving at knowledge. And since I don't entirely know what Dillahunty's epistemology is, all I know is that he used the term justification. Now, justification is a broad term in epistemology, can be used to discuss a number of things. But there is a difference between warrant and justification. So justification implies something you do, okay, potentially, which implies free will. So there's this idea that you justify what you believe, right, to confirm your epistemology. Justified true belief, by the way, is the common terms used to grant knowledge. Okay, I'm justified in what I believe it, and it's true, right? But Alvin Plantinga, a long time ago, offered the idea that justified wasn't the actual best term, that rather warrant was a better term, warranted true belief. Now, what he was saying was he was using what's called properly basic notions. So there's notions, things like I'm other minds other than my own, right? I can't prove it, but it's rational just to believe that. Or it's rational to believe that the world is old, as opposed to being created seconds ago with the appearance of age, things like that. Those are just properly basic beliefs. And Plantinga was making the case that God is a properly basic belief. Kind of an interesting take. And when he was challenged on this and said, well, can't you just assign anything as a properly basic belief? He said, well, no, it depends on your culture and shared. So this is kind of common sense realism is what it's called, where this is Thomas Reed, where we all have a basic understanding of the world that we can rely on our senses and so forth. And this would mean any religious belief could potentially be properly basic within their own cultural context. Kind of interesting, but it's a little bit of a side. I'm just using this to teach some things about, and so this is just epistemology. I'm using this to talk about it a little bit, okay? So justification implies something you do, which implies free will. Now, this is dubious for an atheist, because free will is not a given in atheism. It's absolutely not a given in atheism. In fact, you got to go through some rings to hold to free will. Now, I've done some research. I typically don't research the debaters unless I come across something like this. And Dillahunty calls himself a compatibilist, but all the things I saw, he didn't really expand on it too much. but I know a little bit about compatibilism, and I'm not fully convinced in naturalistic compatibilism. I don't see. It's sort of like it's just not subject to empirical data. Once you make the choice, you made it, right? You can't. I don't see how calling yourself a compatibilist fixes that. Now, to be fair to Dillahunty, he may have good reasons to call himself a compatibilist. That may be. I don't know enough about it to say otherwise. So just to be fair to him. But from my studies on compatibilism, particularly naturalistic compatibilism, I don't see a good, and I'm pretty confident that a lot of scholars, including atheistic or naturalist scholars, would agree with me on this. I don't see how you could really prove that this is the case. It's just a position. They may say, well, if you believe that we don't have free will, that's just a position. Yeah, I would agree with that. So they would just say, look, they believe in this compatibilist system. You believe that some people don't have free will or do. But I would say this. Given that everything is contingent in this world, and there is no God in the atheistic system, and my thoughts are part of a chemical process. In fact, my thoughts are a chemical process. I'm trying to name something that isn't contingent in this world, and I can't think of it. So why, in any naturalist system or any atheistic system, just to be clear, you don't necessarily have to be a naturalist to be an atheist. A Buddhist isn't a naturalist, but secular atheists generally are naturalists. If there are exceptions, I'm not aware of them. I'm sure there are, I'm just not aware of. But I wouldn't know how they would justify that. I couldn't begin to hazard a guess because I don't know everything. So I'm doing the best I can do. But I'll just say, since everything owes itself to something else, like our thoughts being contingent thoughts and part of a chemical process, I don't see a good reason to believe we have free will in a naturalist system. I don't see a reason where we can even call ourselves compatibilist. I don't see it. We're contingent. And in a naturalist system, I don't see how you get out of this. Dillahunty is a compatibilist, not fully justified in and of itself. Justification also implies a moral element. So getting back here to epistemology. So if you're justifying your epistemology, the term justification has a high degree of moral concomitance. And what I mean is that we use this term justified. That's where we get our term, justice. So I've justified this. So I'm free, right? I've justified it. That's a big assumption. So if something's justified, it would seem, if we're not free in a natural system, it would make sense for you to go justify it, number one. Number two, the concept of justice could only be cultural at best. The broadest form, the most authoritative form, and Dillahunty's going to basically say this, of any moral prescription in a natural system is culture. What Sam Harris and Dillahunty say is shared fundamental ideas. Shared foundational ideas is what they say. Big problem, by the way. Like, I have no problem saying that at all. That's a big problem. And, okay, so there's a moral component to the concept of justification. So what Plantinga says then is that it would seem to make more sense that we're warranted, that we have warrant for our beliefs. And that, therefore, would imply that I'm not necessarily free. I possess warrant, right? I happen to possess it. And think about how many ideas and things that you know that aren't things that you went out and actively and proactively learned. Most things you've learned, there's a contingency to it. wrapping this up. So when it comes to justification, okay, it has justification has what's called basing relations, and all that really is that why is this justified? I believe I believe that it's a Sunday because we're not going to get mail. Well, why aren't you going to get mail? Well, because they don't deliver mail on Sundays. Why don't they deliver mail on Sundays? Well, because, and so what this is an infinite regress of justifications. So this is one of the other problems with justification as being a part of your epistemology. It falls into an infinite regress, and that's the death knell to any philosophical system. Whereas warrant doesn't necessarily have this problem, as far as I can tell. Warrant, what it does is it has these first principles that are tautologically basic. And what I mean by that is, and I've mentioned this before, when you look at the laws of logic, they're tautologies. And they can't be proven, they're used to prove things, right? So common sense, what we experience centrally, commonly in a culture, right? This is mainly for foundationalist epistemology. Sorry if these are complex terms. I can't explain them all. I don't have time. And then there is the notion of, and then there's this notion of this tautological laws of logic. They're the most basic ideas. They're self-asserting. They're not circular reasoning. They're self-asserting. So the law of non-contradiction is A is equal to A and not equal to B. That's a tautology. It's a proper tautology, and it's at some point when you get to the most fundamental concepts, that's what you end up with. And so warrant would possess that basic structure. So it stops the infinite regress at this most basic level. So that's why warrant for knowledge, in my estimation, limited estimation, because I haven't been as educated as people who really study these things. In my limited estimation, that seems to me to make more sense than justification. And of course, that gets into reformed epistemology and some other ideas that I don't have time to go into. Okay, so additionally, why do we get to be autocratic in establishing what is enough evidence for belief? So it seems that from a Christian perspective or worldview, God should determine this, and he already has. So I see no reason why the non-believer gets to decide what is enough evidence. We'll go on to that in a part 2.